going to deep dive into this whole export thing because it can sound very sexy as a brand. You know, you're new, you're young, you're growing, and you're like, oh, you know, whether it's online, you go to a trade show, you get a pack of business cards from distributors, and you think, oh, great, we've made it, we're going to go international, we're launching into an exciting new market. But, I mean, you would have collective experience about not always the best thing to do. And actually, I think a first question should be, is exporting even something you should be looking at as a brand? And if yes, at what point in your business life cycle should you be considering that? Paul's got glint. I'll go with Paul first because he's been there, done that as well.
Okay. So with the Tony and Guy role, we had salons in 42 countries. And when we developed the product company, we literally spent, Tony and I literally spent 5 years on an aeroplane going all over the world, which was very nice and very interesting and really opened my eyes to the different cultures and so on and so forth. What you learn, one of the things you learn is that you cannot have a brand that works in your own market and drop that same strategy into another market. You have to tap into local knowledge, I believe. You have to understand, I think we discussed it before, I won't go into it too much again, but the marketing is different, the digital might be different, the reasons people buy might be different, and so on and so forth. So it's really important to know where you want to go, prioritize where you want to go, and probably pick the easy wins first.
But when you were launching the brand, like Label M, at what point did you decide this is going to be an international product for us? And how much was it like, let's grow in the UK first and then see what happens?
Right from the start.
Yeah.
Because we were fortunate in the fact, because we had salons in 42 countries, we had 42 countries ticked off straight away. But we weren't just supplying our own salons, we were supplying distributors who then sold to other salons.
Yeah. So that was very much from the beginning, that the get-go, that products will...
Yes, and again, you know, a lot of it comes back to budgets. It can be quite expensive to launch into a market, and you can't switch the tap off too quickly because you might just be getting over the hurdle, but it needs a little bit more time, or it needs a bit more money, or it needs a bit more resource, or whatever that might be. So you've got to plan it quite carefully and go for the easy wins first. You know, people who speak your same language, and you know, a similar culture.
Yeah. Fernando, you were mentioning that when you started at KLAPP, it wasn't very it was very a domestic kind of brand initially, and then you helped take them international. What was that kind of tipping point that, you know, because Germany, you know, a lot of German brands are very German focused and very strong in that market. You know, what was a tipping point or thought process to say, let's start exploring international markets?
Well, it comes automatically, I would say. So first do your homework, because if you arrive somewhere where have not been before, the first question of a potential distributor is, what have you done before? How is your home market doing? And you know, for us Germans, Germany is not very known for cosmetics. We are more known for cars and industry. So if you don't bring your homework done before, like a basis, then it's difficult to get good partners. So you will get maybe the weak ones and so on. So don't go so early to the international market. So I totally agree with you, Paul. Do the easy ones first. Language is it helps. Okay, you have a smaller problem because your home language is English. So for us in the European Union, it's for sure the European room, the easiest one to go first. And yes, someone, China, will knock on your door, or Korea, big potential markets, even Japan. But then you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, preparation, as you mentioned, of course, it's always very costly to look after a distributor. during, of course, the negotiation of the contract, because you need to trip, you need to understand, you need to spend time, you need to send people, you need to welcome him, you need to disclose so many documentation. So you need to be, of course, ready and have, of course, some investment to do and your homework, as you mentioned, because if you don't do your homework, you will fail, or you will not measure all the risks that are linked to this situation.
Typically, how long would you spend doing that research and bedding down a distributor?
Depending, but at least this is between around 1 year. I mentioned. Yeah, we can have opportunity in 3 months, but when the order is leaving, it can take 1 year. Yeah, it's an average, because sometimes you need registration, you need commitment, training, signing a contract, complying with some standard. So it can be huge.
Yeah, and both you and Paul mentioned the investment, because sometimes it's overlooked that, you know, you're at a trade show, someone gives you a business card, you're like, oh great, we've got a new distributor, and you kind of think, oh, that's easy, because all we need to do is get an order in, and that's done. But you've both mentioned the investment from the brand side. So what does that entail? And typically, when you're launching, a decent-sized market, what kind of investment budget as a brand do you think you need to kind of put together? Edouard.
Of course, I remember sometime, in a trade show like this one, we have some country coming up and they say, oh, I want to be a distributor. I'm really well experimented. I have some other brands, so let's discuss. And finally, the order is not the one we imagine, because the country is not so well organized. If we consider professional or retail, depending, it can be two different strategy. But if you want to visit, if you want to train properly, to send your trainer, to adapt your marketing, to translate, the minimum budget is maybe 25K, more or less, So if the order is not 50 or 60, you don't need this order. It's a lot of money. Maybe in the future, it will be much better. Yeah. So it's your analysis of the market, or finding the right competition, or maybe the distributor is well organized and they have already, $1,000 or $600. But if sometimes it's very small countries and the capacity of the market is too small.
And moving on to that, Raul, so obviously we've kind of covered the basis of at what point you might think, okay, we're doing really well in our home market, we're ready to go international. The points have been, choose the easy markets first. So it can be very exciting to say, China, Southeast, Asia's booming now. So that's where you see there's growth, but the complexities and risk profile is much, much higher. So if we're considering choose some of your easy ones first, what are the kind of processes you need to put in place, before you start exporting and finding new international distributors?
Well, it really depends on the situation, because many brands come to exporting mainly because of revenue. I mean, that's the reason. It's not because they love certain country. It's just somebody in the country can promise there is some more money to get. So, and that's, let's say, what I would see the first issue that you might have. Because if you go only for revenue, you might take decisions that you will regret later on, because either the wrong distributor, or because the wrong region, or the wrong positioning of your brand. So coming to that point, if you are talking about, let's say, the easy ones to get, well, I would really review them very detailed, because easy doesn't mean it's good. It's all about return on an investment. And if you are starting a country, maybe if it's even 60K or even 100K, well, I don't know if that really makes sense as strategy at all. The point is, many brands are already in some markets. So, and the challenge is how to clean that, let's say, mess up.
Which we heard about yesterday when we were talking about, I think Claire's in the room about the counterfeiting and how do you clean up a market first. But so when you're talking about, it can, you've got the trade-off between market potential, easiness, risk profile. So when you're mentally, you could be at this show, you're at Cosmoprof in a couple of weeks, there'll be a lot of distributors coming up to you. What's the mental thing you're going through when thinking, yep, it sounds really exciting, but now you guys there's a lot of collective wisdom here. What advice would you give to those on the floor not to get swayed by all these exciting markets? So, what's your mental checklist now?
Well, if you got a checklist, it's very, very detailed, but top level, what you can say is you really need to scan what are the capabilities of that distributor. really go into the market and check on. If you have never been into a market, then assess yourself via some institutions like commerce chambers or whatever is there for you, so that you know at least what kind of distributor is that, and other options of distributors as well. And it takes time. It's not really easy. Let's start. You can do it, but then you have the revenue, and later on you have the problems. So all in all, it's really going step by step. It's analyzing, getting to know the person, getting also to know the team, because sometimes, and many times it's the case, when distributors come up, they say they have a marketing, let's say, department, but it's maybe only one person in the best case. Maybe sometimes it's outsourced. So, and all that creates issues for the brand.
Fernando, I'll come back to you, because obviously, I think both you and Paul actually were part of the early days when there was no export market, and then you helped develop those markets. And then now that you're exporting to many countries, how has your thinking or psychology changed from early days when we're like, okay, we're doing well in our home market, let's start exporting? Has that changed from early days to where you are now in terms of the level of thinking that goes into that kind of decision making?
Okay, I would say the change is there, of course. So there is no magical formula. We are talking about taking a decision, yes, go international. What kind of partner are you looking for? Does the partner match to you, or does your brand match to the partner that you are talking to? And for sure that you will need also lots of feeling, okay? So you need to feel the chemistry between you, your product, and your brand. And this comes, I think, it's an instinct, okay? If your brand is brand new, I'm talking about the first 3 years, and then someone you feel, okay, I want to go outside, I want to spread my work all over the region or the continent or overseas, then this moment will come from your instinct. I'm not talking yet about processes and about the financial background must be there, because if you go to a market, to enter a market with a very low budget, then better don't do it, because you are wasting money that you can apply for other priorities. So coming back to your question, the timing to go international from your strong market. Some people, they don't even need to go international, because if you are doing a good job in your country, you can even do more and more and more. You have such huge channels, and you have also the omni-channel that is coming, okay? So you don't need to be in all the 5 continents. Why should you go to all over the world and going to other markets that you don't know at all? So Africa, for example, okay, I'm talking now about an experience that we had. We also do mistakes. I saw a very nice brand from France also, and they were exhibiting in a very nice booth, and all the models were white, and and it's a very known brand actually in the market. So and the people maybe that prepared this exhibition, they didn't add the preparation to feel what's the marketing asking for. So if you go there with white models, so the first question is, is your skin only for white people, or is it also for dark skin, or does it match? And 80% of the people will not even stop at your booth to visit you.
Yeah. Paul, you're kind of thinking, well, also let's just go back to the budgets, because it's interesting, because it's very easy to miss the point that the brand has to also invest to develop a new market, because it's easy. Part of the thinking is, well, you've got a distributor out there, they can do all the work and they do the investment, and there is that tension between brand and distributor about who's going to pay for, you know, developing a market. So what kind of numbers were you thinking of when you're, you know, launching into a decent sized market that, you know, you think actually, do you budget for it in advance, or on the fly you're realizing, right, this is costing us money? So what's that kind of process?
I think, personally, I think Edouard, you know, said 25 grand, I think, which is, and we're focusing on numbers, which is important because a brand and a business needs numbers and needs profit. But I think it's equally, if not more important, to understand how they're going to get to those numbers. So stage one for me, when speaking to a distributor, is always some form of business plan. But for those in the room that were here before, you can be blinded by the numbers, and you also have to understand how, you mentioned it, you know, you go over, you jump on an airplane, you go to the country, you sit down with the business owner, you're in a room, you feel as though you're interviewing them, because you're asking all of these questions, and how's this salesman doing, and da-da-da-da. There needs to be a point of achieving what you said, and that is the relationship side. So you should build in time to take them for dinner, or go for a drink, or something. And that's not just because I'm wanting a party, by the way, but that was last night. You need to really get to know these people. You need to know that you can work with them in the future and for as long, you know, long-term objective.
Would you do that in most markets, or is it select markets you think, right, we've really got to put the investment in here? Because, you know, small markets you might think not big enough for us to really worry about and be on the ground. You've got a good distributor, fly with it. But where it's a strategic, potentially lucrative market.
And this is the whole thing between doing it yourself or using a distributor. If I had a huge amount of money to invest, I'd put my own people in there, because then you've got control of absolutely everything. So you'd open a satellite office, you'd use a third-party logistics company, and you'd employ your own people.
Will that depend on the market?
Yeah. Again, depends on, you go back to your priority list and where you want to. If you really want to invest, you should probably be doing it yourself.
Interesting point, because I think, Edouard, do you have both models in play? Do you have distributor and subsidiary models, or?
A few subsidiaries, because we are not so good in managing people out from our office. We just have one in the UK. But it was the story that came to this option. But of course, we are not so fond of having subsidiaries. We have distributor in many countries. But of course, as they mentioned, you know, coming from the franchise industry myself, I implement something which is very common in the franchise industry, which is, the name is disclosure documentation. That means before signing any franchise agreement, you need 3 weeks in advance, 4 weeks, depending the country where you are, to request so many documentation and to send also many documentation. For example, in franchise, you have all the franchisee that are open, all the franchisee which are closed during the last 2 years, and the reason why they are closed and something like that. So I decline this kind of documentation for my distributor as a candidate. So you receive, if I decide to change my distributor in Italy, why I did that. But I request also, in the other hand, so many information, not only financial organization, because they can lie, but that is why I told it's maybe sometimes 6 months, 12 months, because you need to visit maybe 3 times, 4 times, and they need to come maybe 2 times. So it's the investment is more in time and in people to understand the market, visit and analyze the market. And
when you're in a market, you know, so, you know, in an advanced market where, you know, you've got a lot of distributors, and I think in the last session as well, I was saying sometimes, you know, Paul's mentioned before that, you know, distributors would come pitching them. Sometimes in a good market, you've got 4 or 5 distributors. How do you play that relationship out? Do you like go, okay, just one at a time relationship, or are you kind of multi-dating at the same time, trying to figure out which one we're going to hone down on?
I think that's really difficult, and our strategy would always be to try and find a company that could reach the whole market, because the moment you start having 4 or 5 guys who are competing against each other.
What I'm saying is that, you know, when you've got lots of people hitting on you, basically, right? So
I wouldn't know.
Do you play the field, or do you say, look, one at a time?
Oh, now
until you narrow down.
what type of conference
We're-
is this? Vic?
Yeah. And let's just stick to the work stuff here.
Okay, well, again, stage one for me with the business plan. I'd want to see how they felt they could take my brand and achieve success in their country. And again, I would never be totally blinded by the numbers. It would be about the structure as well as the numbers.
Fernando, go back to you in terms of when you started looking at export is something we want to do at KLAPP. Where did you go first? What was the kind of plan of action as a company you went with?
There was no plan. So that's the truth. And
Which is actually most brands, you know. And
there was no plan. And you know, in the business.
That's actually a laughter of recognition from the room.
So I think that in the business you have to be spontaneous. So the best formula is to make a tailor-made solution. If you have the freedom from your brand, from your company, it helps a lot if you have this freedom to make the budget maybe higher or lower, to adapt to the situation that you are facing. Yes, you can invest in a distributor. You can give him money support. If you give, you will receive. So, and that's a philosophy that I always had. So whatever you give, you will receive at least a double back. And and be a gentleman to the business. And I think that it's a magic formula. In some companies, some structures, it works. In other ones, in let's say bigger scale companies, it gets difficult. But I think that all of us here are in the professional business. So we are mostly medium-sized companies, and I think that open mind helps a lot to enter and to find good partners, because you are looking for a partner for your let's say at least your working life.
So do you remember any of the first countries you went into?
Yeah, the first country was of course Austria, because of our language. So it's very easy to enter Austria. Then we went to the Benelux countries, and of course the most difficult one was France, for sure. So it was like, you can imagine, it was like a derby, Man City against Man United. I know that you are Man U fan.
That's no longer a derby, actually.
Yeah, and so if you go as a German brand to France, then it's difficult to go there. But that was a challenge, and it worked.
Tell us about that story, because, you know, obviously we look at, it's Europe, you know, we're kind of neighbourly. No.
I'm a Man United fan, and we lost 3-1 yesterday, so that's what he means by that.
Well, the story, France, you have to be lucky with people. So it was like a subsidiary. It was not a distributor. So this was a different business model. So we realized to find a distributor in France, no. It's difficult. There are not so many even today. So the brands, they have their own distribution themselves, or you have like a few distributors that are maybe focused on devices or some wellness or spas, but not really for facial, for the professional business, which is different. And so we met a few interesting salespeople in a trade show in Paris, and we thought, okay, let's try with them. So first with 2 people, and 2 years later there were 13 outside. It's an investment, of course, that you have to do. It's a risk. Yeah, that was a good formula. It was a good timing. It was, you know, in the late 90s, where the wellness was not 90s, sorry, 2000 and 2001. So it was a different time. So the wellness was coming up. People were looking for novelties. Everyone is looking for novelties. So, and we were known for that, okay, bringing novelties every month, new products, new innovations, phasing in, phasing out. It's a big issue in our days, and yeah, that was a good experience.
Did the France story work out, or
Sorry?
did the France kind of expansion work out as you planned?
It worked out, yes. In our days, I have to admit that it's not doing so well anymore, maybe due to the market situation in general. But it worked quite well, yes.
Edouard, we'll go back to the budget side, because obviously one point of the conversation was, you know, as a brand, you've got to invest, flying out there, sending your educators out there, etc. But from the internal point of view, what are the other kind of budgets or infrastructure you need to put in from a brand to start looking at managing international? Because like, each of you have been international sales directors, teams. Sometimes it's one person managing the world until you suddenly have to become more sophisticated.
Except the staff, you know, because of course staff is depending on the number of distributor or you're willing in terms of development also, or your duty in terms of services. So it's the other part, you know, you need to give services to your partner, to your distributor, whatever it is in training or now in maybe in digital, online. So they need so many services. And as a manufacturer, we manage France in direct, so we know exactly what we need to do and what the distributor needs to implement, like in Germany also. So the idea is how to replicate the business and to replicate the kind of services they need. So if we have a new CRM program, we say, oh, you should have a new CRM program with this kind of solution. If you do market survey or studying of the competition, they need to do that also. So the idea is we have these services, we can help to promote, or we can support. Of course, all the distributor, all the manufacturer in the price structure, exportly speaking, we give, I don't know, 10, 15, 20%, 25%, if we are very generous, to marketing, social, digital, training. So it is what we have inside this amount, then and how it's used.
Yeah, and do you use common resource, so the kind of marketing, sales resource you have in-house for the brand? Is that then common for the distributor, or do you have to start setting up separate teams to manage them?
No, it's of course the international team is growing with the number of countries, of course, but sometimes we don't. We can have, you know, tailor-made support. Sometimes they say, "Oh, I need one of your trainer for 2 months to train." So it's a commitment. Either we are ready to find out a trainer able to live 2 months, 3 months in a new country to train everybody from the sales people, the marketing team, the trainer. So it's things.
It's a big investment. Yeah. It's not simply the 25,000 kind of trip, regular trip. You're talking almost 6 figures really by the time you're developing exporting as a proper strategy for the business.
I think it's a really important point that it's your brand, and you want it eventually, when you get your global expansion, for it to look the same everywhere you go. So it's important that the source of that comes from one place. And if you do use consultants or agencies in different countries, they must get sign-off from the head office. They must keep the consistency of the brand, the message. It's hugely important. So I would never use different marketing people in different countries as such, unless they got sign-off from the main company.
Raul, have you figured out a formula yet for the export strategy? I mean, after a while, like Fernando says, and the story that many brands talk about, at the beginning, there really isn't much planning. It's very opportunistic. You find a distributor, you go to a market, sometimes you fail and fail badly, sometimes you win, and then you kind of develop. And one of the brands yesterday speaking, they were talking about how over their 20-year journey, they've switched from being very opportunistic, just expand, and then suddenly somewhere down that cycle, they realize they've got to be more strategic and focused. And when I was talking to her offline, and I was like, there's many distributors chasing. They're like, not our priority right now. They're like, we've got 2 markets we're focused on. We need to take them this year. That's all we care about, those 2 big markets. And even though there are many, many other countries chasing them, she's like, just not priority.
There can be a bit of ego. Oh, we're in 20 countries, we're in 25 countries, we're in 30 countries, but, you know, Kazakhstan is spending 10p. Ego can take over. That's one thing I would say we learnt in our business, that, you know, we're on this exciting drive, expanding and travelling and getting new distribution. But when you analyse what it was costing you to do that, and the time, you've only got so much resource, and the time that you're spending on those little markets, should I say, when really you'd be better spending that time on your Spains, your Germanys, your Frances, your so on and so forth. So yeah, don't let your ego run away with you, I guess, is the point.
Yeah. We've got a few minutes. If you have any questions on the floor, feel free to ask. Good point there, because, for example, you know, I look after the India market, and, you know, I did a recce to Bangladesh in August to look at that, and it's a really interesting market. And I was like, wow, okay, you've got the extremes. You've got poverty and you've got crazy wealth. And some of the infrastructure I'd seen was better than anything in India. In one zone itself, it's like Hong Kong, Singapore. You know, and then I went back to, but it was, for what India is, it was 15, 20 years behind India. And I went back to some of our brands saying, we're thinking about doing a small show there. But I said, the challenge is, you've got to, like I talked to brands who are entering India, I was like, if you've got 5 years, blood, sweat, tears, don't think about the money, go to India. If you're looking at, you know, 1.4 billion, we need $1 each, that mentality, forget it. And then I was like, the challenge with Bangladesh, I was saying to the Indian brand, you've got to commit, because you can make far more money much more quickly in just conquering India, right? So these other South Asia markets, you know, are much smaller than most of India. And Bangladesh has got 300 million almost population, and a lot of, but we can see 5-7 years from now it'll be crazy, huge. But it's a strategic decision. Do you invest for the long term, but you've got to go for the pain in the short term. Raul, any formulas for, you know, people in the room that, you know, you've been through those experiences of, you know, we said at the beginning, not much planning, bit of chaos, you learn on the job, but what kind of formula do you have in place now for when you're looking at entering new markets and finding the right kind of partner?
Well, formula would be very easy if there was one, but what I can say is most of the times the negotiation skills are just not there, and that's for many commercials. So obviously if you are trying to clean up the markets, you will need to renegotiate many things. And that's simple. At the beginning, you were only thinking about doing quick revenue with enough margin to live. But if you want to invest in a market and do everything as it should be, then you will also need to renegotiate to see who is taking which part. And that is, let's say, not a formula, but it would be the first step to really do something different. And by that, also you need to make sure you have your people that are negotiating well capable to negotiate. And it's a very, very key thing for that.
So have you been through that experience where you've opened up the market in your early days, and then suddenly you realize as you're growing as a brand, you're becoming more focused on your strategy, that we've got to fix this now because we hadn't thought, like Paul was saying in the last session, when you're entering a market, think 5-10 years from now, not today, that there's a quick order coming through, and then now you're realizing down the line, okay, we've got to fix this problem. So is that some of the challenges you've seen or seeing?
Well, mainly most of my career has been doing exactly that, because I am really in there.
Firefighter.
Not firefighter, I don't like that word because I'm not firefighting, but I'm trying to restructure. And then when I enter in restructuring, I come in always to the same topics.
And then are you then looking at switching distributors or helping grow?
It can be everything. It can be either renegotiating, finding a sweet spot, or changing a little the cooperation, how it's working. Maybe some markets that are having already a good revenue and a good standing, it doesn't mean it will last forever. And it doesn't mean you have the same priorities after 10 years. So all that needs to be assessed.
Yeah. Good point on the cleaning up the market, because that came up yesterday, and it's always in our industry. How do you go about doing that? Because it's a common problem. The bigger the brand gets, the more the problem is in the market. I'm sure most of you had that. You've been through those issues at different points. So what tips would you give to those on the floor about how to go about trying to clean up the market? And whose responsibility is it as well, actually?
Well, it depends what you have negotiated and what's written. So if you have really a point where you have an agreement and the agreements were kept, well, then it's a good starting point to really know you can change something in that relationship. But if there are commitments that have been met, put on paper, and they never happened, then you have a problem. And that's, let's say, the way how you should approach it. And it's a complex thing. I cannot reply to you because it depends on each situation.
Any tips from you, Edouard, on that?
On that, of course, at Guinot we request our distributor to implement also a local selective distribution agreement with all stockists. So it can be an option, to limit the right to sell out or to resell, but of course controlling. And if you are people who do some e-commerce, you need also to have a contract with them. Despite it's not the best solution, but it's putting some limits to some black sheep, who want to destroy the brand. And sometimes, of course, depending the situation, it's your right as a manufacturer to suit, or it's the right of the distributor. It's situation can be both, but contractualization and negotiation is better. For example, Amazon in France, you cannot find any Guinot or Maricourt product, but in the UK, I can find. So, but it's not my subsidiary, we're supplying. So, it's three different product, or you need to track your own product by a code or something like that by distributor. It's a big investment also, but it's to protect the brand.
And that's just a trade-off, I guess, in the end, about how much you want to invest in chasing up the cleanup. And yeah,
it's big money.
Yeah. But we're going to wrap up. Any questions? No.
But if I can give just an advice, is if you have any inquiries from any countries, first be polite and answer, of course, but if you go in negotiation, you have yourself or anybody of your staff to visit and spend time on the market. Otherwise, you will do some mistake.
Sorry, it's not a question. I just want to share something, because since they mentioned the international market, I just share something happened with our clients in China, that most European clients come to us with, which they already had a deal in China, which is well done, congratulations. But then when they come to us, they want things compliance done in a week or in 2 weeks' time, which is not possible. And I just refer to that gentleman there as well. The compliance getting more and more expensive as well in China and in other countries, in Korea, for example, and Japan. So that's also need to be put into consideration as you're developing the international market. And some of the claims in Europe doesn't apply in Asia. For example, the selling point for them in Ireland was the organic. But then they have different standards, obviously, in China and in Korea, let me put it that way. So they can't really claim that. So all the labels and everything has to be changed. They need to brand themselves as, the way they want to approach in the Asian kind of market. It can be done, but just take a little bit extra time as you want planning for the international side of it.
Yeah, it just adds to the complexity that don't go into it too easy, because I think the kind of summary is it's a long-term marriage you're trying to into. Can sound very exciting at the beginning as you're getting wooed, especially at trade shows, and lots of people kind of trying to date you, but it's a long-term commitment you're getting into. And I mean, what's come up often, even is from each of the speakers, was the legal requirement, right? And we touched on that yesterday in our last session, and we've got Claire in the room, and I think she'll be loving this, because it's just, while it's easy to get into sending an order over to a new distributor, get your contracts in order first, because like Raul was saying, sometimes that's your get out clause. If you've got a good contract in place with your distributor and for that market, that could be your get out jail card. Otherwise, you could be in a long-term mess in a market that could be important in the long term.
First is also protect your brand, your name, your innovation.
Do you do that? Yeah, that's a good. We did touch on that yesterday. Whose responsibility? And when you're entering a new market, I mean, one, do you strategically look at, we're not there, we may be one day, but we're going to start doing the trademark IP rights in advance, or do you wait for, a distributor? At which point do you start looking at the kind of trademark IP protection?
We do in advance,
early as possible.
There is no magic formula for that. even then, because you have to watch the size of the market. For example, there are for the IP rights. Okay, first you protect the brand where you are able to sell it, and if you do a worldwide IP protection, then you need lots of
lot of money,
funds,
yeah,
lots of money for that. Okay, and if you go step by step for the brand IP rights, then you will for sure cover the markets where you want to be. And but China, okay, we knew that somewhere the Chinese question would come. The IP rights in China are a very important issue. Okay, even in the Chinese literation as well as the European one, and it got very regularized in the last years. And I agree with you. Yes, the registration procedure in China is one of the most detailed one, and it takes some time. It takes money, of course, but even then, you have to be prepared. So if you want to start export, don't start with China, because you will for sure not be able. Your product, they will find something in your product.
Or just one SKU.
Or only one SKU, yes. But you know, there's no global packaging that you can apply all over the world. So we have heard before Mina talking about Scandinavia. If you enter to Finland, you need Swedish and Norwegian in your packaging. So then if you start with specific countries, then it gets complicated. And so, yeah, for the global expansion, somewhere in China will come across, and then you have to take the decision. You do it or you don't do it. Yeah.
Well, talking about China, I just want to say a lot of people want to do the China market, which I do understand because huge market. But from our experience, I think you don't need to talk about whole China. It's massive. You're talking about one area or one province or one city. I think it's big enough. It's multi-million. It's enough market. So you don't need to target in the whole China. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and it is complex. And we covered yesterday that there's many scare stories that, because China, I don't know if it's still the case, but it's on a first registration basis, not first use. So you could be in the market for 20 years, you forget to register and someone else does it, and you're out of the market pretty much, even as a manufacturer. So you've got to really be careful about the China story. Quick summary of your formulas, your tips for those on the floor that are now really excited about exporting to new markets. Some positivity, right, Paul?
Some positivity. It's great fun. It's a great journey. I love the industry, and I've worked in it for many, many years. And it's a people business. It's a relationship business, and it's fantastic going around the world. And
you were lucky. You and Tony on private jets all around the world. It's like a different story to most of us.
Well, if you know Tony, bless him, he's gone now. But a very quick story. Story. Went to Australia. Okay, they just launched the A380 airplane, and we had business class tickets to go to Australia. And I thought, yes, this is going to be amazing. I can have a relax. I can have a drink. And there's a drink theme, obviously. You've got that. He talked for 22 hours. Absolutely drove me insane. He did. He's a little Italian guy, and goodness me, I was destroyed. But it wasn't jet lag; it was Tony lag when I arrived there. It's not really a tip. Well, yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Don't travel with the boss. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to export. You have to be international. Otherwise, your brand will not be complete. So, and of course, that all of us sitting here, we have to have fun. If you don't have fun in the business, then the business will not run at all. So, a business is also a little bit of party, and that belongs to the business, and that makes people also get attracted by you.
Lovely tip.
Another one. Another thing, when I'm studying, the big company in the beauty industry, the French one, 20% of the turnover is done in France, 80% export. So that's why, you know, we still have many to do.
Well, and from my side, I think, as already was mentioned, it's a human business. It's a people business. And you should be careful who you are sending out, because it's not just somebody that speaks English and is not afraid of talking to people out there. It's about a person that can really engage to that people, relate to that culture, understand that culture, and also understand how the people live in there. Because it doesn't really bring anything as benefit if you have a person sitting on the plane, going to an office, not eating what is available there, not experiencing what people experience in there, and just flying back and saying, well, I was in that country and it's A, B, and C. So really deep dive into the cultures, and the person that you find should have also fun with it and really be capable to do it. And I think that's one of the key things.
Yeah, great tips. We've got to move over because we've run out of time. But in essence, you've got to export, understand the market, have fun doing it, have fun with all the challenges and the journeys, because there will be lots of interesting stories you pick up on the way. You know, thank you very much for the panel. We could be going on for hours and hours, but no, really, really thank you for your wisdom and, you know, sharing practical knowledge for everyone.
Thank you.